The South African Heritage Publishers have partnered with the Limpopo Heritage Resources Authority for the publication of the first book of writings taken from the Ancestral Voices collection called Limpopo Medicine. The book aims to identify a selection of English translations of writings and extracts originally collected in Xitsonga, Sesotho, Leboa by mother tongue speakers of these languages in the 1930s and 40s. Now, Terence Ball is from Heritage Publishers, and he joins us now to tell us more about this selection that covers traditional medicine and related cultural practices of Limpopo's people. Terence, a very good morning to you. Welcome to Morning Live.
Good morning. Thank you very much indeed for having me.
Talk to us first about Ancestral Voices. What is it for somebody who's hearing this for the first time?
Yeah, some years ago I met with Dr. Nemuzavadi, a respected historian of the Vavenda, a very elderly man when I met him. And we were discussing another heritage project, and he asked me to go to the University of Pretoria to see the writings that they had in storage at the university. And it's a collection of 891 writings in 7 of our indigenous languages by 186 authors. 7 languages because Ndebele and Siswati were not written languages in those years. So what we are doing now is collecting all of these writings on various traditional subjects. And the first one, of course, is Limpopo Medicine, which is in English only. Future books will be both mother tongue and English. Indigenous language, left-hand page, English, right-hand page.
And it features 186 contributing authors? Tell us a little bit about that.
Well, we can't tell you awfully much. We've managed to trace the descendants of about 5 or 6 of the authors so far, and I've been able to visit the grave of one of the authors to pay our respects. The oldest author was born in 1844, Menziwa Balfour, and died in 1944. The youngest was born in 1918, Mabale, and died in 1999, and he wrote 2 works in Xitsonga when he was only 24 years old. The majority of them are either teachers, priests, members of the cloth, or traditional leaders. There are a number of traditional leaders of that time who wrote stories of their own people.
And 1930s and 1950, tell us a bit about that, the collections from that period.
Well, they're all written in that period. And what we're now having to do is to put them into the new indigenous language orthography and then translate them into English to ensure that they're more widely accessible by all South Africans. Obviously, a lot of South Africans won't be able to speak Tshivenda, so the Tshivenda stories are available in English as well.
And many of these works were written after you've interviewed, you know, the then elderly who related their indigenous knowledge and traditional practices. Tell us more about that.
Well, if I may, can I just read a little extract from here? This is a writing by a man called Ndambi. Quite by chance, I know his relatives. And in the 1930s, he interviewed a then elderly man who starts his discussion as follows. Greetings all. I am Muhlavi Makuhani Matsavela Ndove. I'm from Botswana and Savi, Hlengweni, Portuguese, East Africa. My parents came to the Transvaal at Mashawu village, fleeing wars with the Nguni people. I would like to relate matters relating to ancestral traditional healing. And then he goes on to relate his experience. He was clearly a Sangoma and talks about how traditional medicines were made by our ancestors. Now, extraordinarily, I mean, his grandparents could go back to the late 1700s. So what we're reading here is the oral tradition of the Xitsonga, going back as far as early 1800s and late 1700s. Quite extraordinary in this country.
I can only imagine, What are you learning? What did you learn as you put this book together? What are some of the lessons or the aha moments? There was so much at that time. So many.
The only known writing in isiZulu by somebody who was at the Bambata Rebellion, or about the Bambata Rebellion. A lady, a nun, in fact, at Mhlopenkulu Mission outside Ulundi, interviewed a then elderly man, Somoshungwana Magwaza, who fought at Isandlwana. The only known record of the views and thoughts of an Amazulu warrior who fought there. She then writes down the story of a traditional Zulu folktale told to her by an elderly woman who she says is about to die. She was born when Mpande reigned. So that's how far back we are going, and it is quite extraordinary. It is the first time in the history of this country that millions of black indigenous language mother tongue speakers will be able to read about their very own villages, their own people, written by their ancestors.
Yeah.
And that's what makes it so exciting. It really is extremely moving.
Yeah, and it's so exciting because it's our stories being told by us. Do you know what I mean? It's not somebody else's view, and it's somebody that interviewed the young man at that time or the young woman at that time.
Correct. And another one of the interviewees in Xitsonga was born under Gugunyani. Now, Gugunyani was Shoshangan's grandson. So, you know, you can imagine how long ago that goes back, and his family then moved to Spilonken in Limpopo, and he came to work in Johannesburg, and he relates his experience working in early Johannesburg and going down to Kimberley to work on the diamond mines, where he earned £2 a week, which was a huge sum of money in those days.
At that time, yeah.
So, you know, there are so many fascinating anecdotes within these stories.
And then the Setswana, upcoming volumes of the Setswana, I believe that's also coming up?
Correct. We've got 9 volumes of Setswana in preparation. That is bilingual. In fact, over the last week, we've discovered the descendants of 2 of our authors. One of the authors, Sedumedi, who wrote a book on the Batlokwa history, was the Hoshi of the Batlokwa at the time, and his great-granddaughter is the current Hoshi of the Batlokwa. And the other is a gentleman called Philip Katumetsi, who writes a fascinating history about the murder of the Bakwena Hoshi, and how his grandfather was affected by that, had to flee and join the Bahurutsi outside Zeerust. I'm sure everybody knows where the Bahurutsi come from. And he tells a fascinating story also, you know, about his life. He served in the First World War. Another anecdote that comes to mind is the only writing we know of in our indigenous languages about the effect of the Spanish flu on the Mamabolo population in Limpopo. The only language, the only writing in our indigenous languages on that tragic event.
Why do you think there hasn't been writing about indigenous languages or indigenous culture?
Sorry,
why do you think there wasn't enough, or there wasn't any, or
well, you know,
we're not talking about it?
Certainly in the far north of Limpopo, a number of the authors we have would have been the first literate people within their communities, because clearly literacy moved together with the missionaries.
Yeah.
So if we go to the Eastern Cape, the earliest mission, as I understand, opened in about 1820 around Butterworth. So literacy came to the Amaxhosa much earlier than some of the other peoples. And I assume it was just because of that. There's relatively little written, because people weren't literate at that time in their mother tongue.
All right, Terence, thank you so much for talking to us. We could have a conversation about this the whole day.
Exactly.
Thank you so much for the book. I'm interested in the indigenous languages and the fact that we're telling our own stories. Thank you so much. Terence Ball is a publisher at Heritage Publishers, and we've been talking about their latest book titled Ancestral Voices, Limpopo Medicine. Interesting. Get yourself a copy of that book.